Greetings. My name is Brad Hessel, and I'm chair of the Wake County Libertarian Party. And this is our monthly for May 2026 uh, video for the WakeLP newsletter. And as we've been doing, we are going to have a guest this time, and it's another candidate who's running in November for election, and his name is Brian K. Lewis. He is a former chair of the Wake County Libertarian Party, and he is running for Wake County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor, a position that he's run for a couple of times in the past. And I'm going to just start out by giving Brian an opportunity to tell us a little bit about who he is and how he got to where he is.
Brad, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here and always glad to speak with you and the missus and the family. So, and just to add to that, I've actually served as a soil and water supervisor in the past. And, the sometimes folks look at that and go, oh, that's the dog catcher race. And well, it's not. There's a lot involved with it. And having served for 6 years previously in a different district, I've really gained a lot of hands-on experience in what tools are available to a soil and water district, as well as a good insight as to how to navigate the systems that are associated with that environment. The the reality that got me there uh, after serving in the Navy. I had been an environmentalist, active as a kid in school, and did oceanography, and then I got to go see the world, and I saw a lot of things in the environment that really got my concern. When I got out of the military, I immediately moved into becoming an environmental activist, being engaged, going and finding solutions and raising awareness. And one of the things I found it was kind of interesting to me at that point was how many folks their first answer was, and I think a lot of people do this instinctually. They see something they don't like and sort of hands on hips and say, well, there ought to be a law. And well, should there be? And I served as a conservation chairperson for Sierra Club chapter in the Everglades Restoration Project. Sat on some amazing committees and boards in that role as an advisor on environmental issues. And the more in depth that I got to solving these problems, the more I began to see the concepts of lawfare. I got to see the concepts of how the law was actually the thing in the way of the best ideas, the way in which obligations and rules were structured by design, oftentimes. You know, Sometimes the antagonists in the environmental story, well, their pockets are a lot deeper. And what ends up landing in statutes and ends up in rules and codes and guidelines is not necessarily what the band of underfunded activists wanted to achieve. And I began to realize how the law wasn't where the solutions were. And I did find that there were a lot of folks who were putting private capital, private investment into phenomenal ideas, phenomenal solutions, things that worked, and there was success, and people were able to make a wage and care for their families while still living by the values that were core to them as environmentalists. That was really inspiring, and that kind of set me in a long course. And to keep, for the purposes of time, the fun things that I do, from running a farm. I've done a few seed companies in environmental, everything from cloth diapers to a farm which I live on here, the Chicory Hedgehog Farmstead. I milk goats and I collect eggs. And what got me into doing all of those things was reducing my food miles. And my goal has always been to live the very values that I hold dear, and that's what I do. So, uh, being up here in North Carolina now for 15 years, my My goal is as I see the same ills that affected us in South Florida with development and infill, well, those problems that they deal with today, I'm very familiar with, and we were arguing quite a bit against a lot of that process. And we need to be smarter about here in Wake County how we're going to manage our growth, how we're going to manage. And by doing so, we do so through market forces, do so by helping the farmer maintain a farm, helping people do the things that they want to do, not protecting farms just for the farm's sake, but protecting farms for the people who are actually running them, operating them, and maintaining livelihoods.
So you've told us that soil and water supervisor is does not catch dogs. What what does the soil and water supervisor do?
The soil and water districts originally were created as a response to the Dust Bowl. And it's one of those interesting things in history where you hear the victor tells the tale, if you will. But when we look at what really happened, the federal government was providing incentives in the 20s and in the teens to get people to go out and build farms out in the Midwest. And conditional to that was following the rules that they set. And the rules that they established were to break all the turf. The rules that they established controlled planting cycles and farm layouts and really micromanaged from Washington, D.C. Well, those techniques were not in line with the environment that these farmers were operating in. And we got into a dry season, and the dry season really snowballed, albeit a lack of snow, but really just grew into what we now know today as the Dust Bowl. And there are tons of stories, guidelines, and ethos and myths about what was done and why it was done. But one of the things that was done was the recognition that top-down approach to agriculture was not going to be successful. So at that time, in 1932, the Soil and Water Conservation, or it was at that time called the Conservation Corps or the CCC, it was put together, and every watershed in the United States is within a soil and water district. Some of those districts are sort of incorporated in their state governments. Some of those districts are fully independent. Some of those districts exist as a hybrid operation. So the formats are a little bit different, but the goal is to help coordinate through voluntary action. There's actually not a heavy hand authority in the soil and water district, but rather to coordinate resources, coordinate ideas, coordinate training and experience so that farmers can be successful, and that those are ideas that are locally promulgated so that we have local solutions for farmers as opposed to top-down national ones. So that's really what the conservation districts are for. They are for helping farmers keep and operate good, healthy, profitable farms.
So libertarians don't like to tell people what to do. They like to have people do what they want to do. So this is like a perfect position for a libertarian because you don't
It
have the power to
is.
tell anybody what to do.
It is. The goal is we provide resources and may the best ideas win. Um,
Okay.
I go ahead.
So talking about ideas, I see that some of the things that you're interested in specifically with respect to Wake County, I see safeguard Wake's water resources, for example. Well, what's that about?
In any given space, we have what is referred to as a carrying capacity. And carrying capacity means, well, how much water is going to fall on our heads? And do we collect it? Do we use it? How do we use it? Where does it go? And in that, there is the likelihood, and many communities have experienced this, is the growth beyond the carrying capacity of a region. So we outstrip the resources available to us. We are currently now, and you could see it numerically if you get, I can get a little geeky about the numbers that we like to look at. But if you look at our major watersheds and our water reservoir areas, you begin to see wider dynamics occurring, meaning the rate of drawdown is happening so fast. We do get to currently catch back up, but that's not a steady number. So that's telling us that's the indicator that we're getting closer to a capacity crunch. There are a handful of projects that are out there to acquire more land to grow the size of reservoirs. There are discussions now of doing what they call closing the pipe. And that is when you flush the toilet, it goes to the treatment plant. The treatment plant cleans it up and sticks it back in the tap. And the technology is there that the water is perfectly fine. This is what our astronauts do in space. This is good, clean science. But a lot of folks, there's the ick factor of the notion that the poop pipe goes back into the water tap. And so we address that by educating folks about what's available, what's out there. And we kind of go towards those ideas so that we can minimize how much we draw from natural reservoirs. Um, Groundwater is an issue as well in that where we protect what we call permeability, how much area where that water falls, that water doesn't just run off into the stream, the river, the lake, and then off to the ocean and what we call to tide, but rather has an opportunity to hold on the ground, sink into the ground, and recharge our groundwater resources. So there's a lot to it, and there's a lot to it that I could enjoy getting into, but I think each of them is sort of a course on its own.
So, talking about rivers and lakes and oceans, we're not next to the ocean. There are 100 counties in North Carolina, and I'm imagining that the counties probably don't exactly line up with 100 different watersheds. So there's a need for some coordination that goes beyond just Wake County or any particular county. And how, given that you've got 100 different or 99 different other soil and water folks to deal with, or commission groups, I guess it's a committee or a group, right, for in each county. How do you manage to coordinate things uh, that are technically significant beyond the borders of one single county?
Well, soil and water districts have a loose confederation amongst themselves. We have a national body. I actually, in my previous role as a soil and water supervisor, was the vice president of the Florida Association of Conservation Districts. And so, in that role, it was making sure that all of our districts stayed sort of unified in message, unified in knowledge and understanding. We shared resources, and really all of it because the soil and water districts have no what we say governmental teeth. It's voluntary. We have to be able to sell our ideas in such a way that people want to participate, and high adoption rates are our goal. So we really tune programs that answer to people. We tune programs to answer to what their demands are, as opposed to us sort of imposing what we think their needs are. So doing so through coordination is really, really big. One of the things that I think is really important here in North Carolina that, from my previous experience, I don't, I know where I want us to be. And that includes tighter coordination with the surrounding districts because we do share watersheds. We do receive water that has left other counties and has, in some cases, been managed well, and in other cases, not. And then we discharge water through these same systems into adjacent counties. And well, we should be good neighbors and should avoid putting ourselves in a position where we're harming our neighbor.
So another initiative that I know that you have talked about in the past is urban farming. And I know that you yourself have, as you mentioned earlier, have personal experience with that. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about how that both with respect to what you do yourself and how conceptually that kind of activity plugs into making life better for everybody in Wake County.
The urban homestead movement is sometimes predicated on people's concern for quality and sometimes predicated on concerns for environment, sometimes predicated on the idea of the nostalgia of it, and all of which are completely valid components. I would speak for myself to say that uh, it was a goal of mine several decades ago to say I wanted to be able to reduce my food miles. And I committed about 30 years ago. I says, my goal is to make one meal a week that I produced by my own hand, and started, backyard gardening and being able to produce. And my early meals were strictly vegetarian meals that I would produce. And well, I met my goal fairly quickly, but they weren't exciting meals. They weren't full meals, and it definitely wasn't a caloric windfall, if one will. Um, Experienced a pretty nasty hurricane one year, and we had no power for 16 days. Neither did the grocery stores or the gas stations or anybody else. And as a big aquarium hobbyist, I lost some major aquarium assets uh, through that mess, and also recognized that having 2 weeks of food supply, they tell you, oh, a hurricane's coming, you should have a few days worth of food supply. Well, yeah, I had, a week or two of food. We had stuff, dry goods and canned goods and such. And when you got to the second week and you suddenly realize I have emptied everything. And I was relying on my company was providing us boxed lunches to so that we'd keep going to work, and and being able to bring home a boxed lunch to feed my family. I realized that I needed to be better concerned about how we provision through these kinds of system shocks, whether they be natural disasters or whether they be imposed, such as we saw uh, during the COVID issues. And what I found is really once you get past trying to store a few weeks worth of food, you begin having to implement systems and mechanisms and of just shelf rotations, and that didn't excite me or interest me too much. And I got into producing more food. And now I get to say every morning my breakfast has food miles that are measured in feet because I go out back and I collect my eggs. I get my milk from my goats. I don't produce enough chicory yet to replace all of my coffee, but I do have my own chicory that I drink coffee. Yeah, so it's one of those things where, for me, it is a fun component to be able to say, and it's very fulfilling to be able to say that I've produced my food. That when everything gets shut down, I can still produce food, and I really enjoy that. And there's something comforting about that. That idea is something that used to be very traditional. I grew up with that, with my grandmother being very involved in canning. To her, it was the time of season. When we were all younger and they weren't importing food from all over the world, when something was in season, it was in abundance and cheap. We would go and buy flats upon flats and then sit and prep it and can it and have it ready to go in through the year. And well, that's the lifestyle that I've created, not wholly out of necessity. I'm not one to say that necessarily the grocery stores will run out of food, but I've seen it. I've seen the grocery stores go empty shelved. And, you know, having the more people who are capable of handling themselves through the shock, the less impactful the shocks are overall. So if 20% of the people have enough provisions, then the grocery stores don't go empty and people don't go without food. And that's really, I think, the high level logic and that I really support. And I'm So I can geek out a little bit about some of this, and then I can get really high end philosophical because um, that's how we take care of each other by taking care of ourselves by making sure that we're not the burden.
So clearly, the historical process has been to reduce the number of people involved in agriculture. When the country first started, uh, a significant majority of folks were involved in producing food, and now, of course, it's just a small number, particularly when you're talking about commercial operations as opposed to individual, farmer, urban farmer types that are just growing for themselves. And most people in Wake County uh, either lack the inclination or the ability. I mean, people living in apartment buildings, for example, are not going to be able to grow enough food for themselves, most likely. Although
That's a discussion.
I have heard about some initiatives where people grow stuff on the roofs and stuff. Yeah. But the strategically, does Wake County grow enough food for everyone that lives here?
There's two sides to that. The first one is, I would say the quick answer is no. Uh, the wider answer is we never want to be in a position in any market scenario where we have this single point dependency. You don't want to live on an island and everybody survives off of potatoes, and then all of a sudden you can't grow potatoes anymore. People will starve. I'm alluding to something very specific that happened in the world that people are well aware of. And so having diversity. When I go to the state farmers market, which we're blessed to have right here in Raleigh, and I'm 10 minutes away, I've got growers who are coming from all over the place. I have growers who are, coming in from Harnett, Johnson, Franklin, who are bringing goods in. We like that kind of model. We really do. And, for me, if I find there's one particular thing, there aren't too many people who have goats and milk goats. Well, I have goats and I milk goats, and they make more milk than I could ever possibly drink. So I actually have somebody who uses it for making soaps and stuff. The concept of exchanging what we're good at for the things that we're not best at, that concept of voluntary exchange of goods and services, well, that alludes without geographic boundaries to how we would trade with other counties, other states, other nations. There's a wide scale picture. But when there are system shocks, and there have been and there will continue to be system shocks, supply chain shocks, the idea of being able to produce the grains and the proteins that we need to just sustain ourselves, uh, I think that's just wise planning overall and resilience to the system.
So let's talk a little bit about the actual horse race. I think you've run uh, first of all, just remind me in Florida when you served, was that what county was that in Florida that you were
That was Broward County.
Broward County, and how does that Broward County compare to Wake County in terms of size?
So Broward County is about 20 years and twice the size difference. And I will tell you that definitely gives me a lot of insight. I lived in Broward County when I watched our last commercial grower. We had fruit groves go out of business. The only remaining commercial grower at all there is what they call a tourist farm, and they have the best key lime pies in the world. Um, you know, they don't grow key lime pies, so but they do avocados and citrus. But it is really there as a learning farm and as a tourist thing. And beyond that, there are no more. I'll just say that in the '60s and into the '70s, Broward County, just the one county, was responsible for one-third of all of the spring vegetables that were provided to the Eastern Seaboard. It was a phenomenal agricultural market. It has obviously dramatically been reduced. Building has gone all the way out to US 27, the Everglades impacts, and I've been deeply involved in a lot of those. We have a lot of advantages here in Wake County that Broward County didn't have, but we can't spoil them the way that Broward County has. I left Broward County because it grew into something I didn't want to be a part of. And I wanted a place that was better for my family. I wanted a place that was more relaxing to be a part of, and not the high tension. And well, there are elements in Raleigh and in Wake County who are trying to push and follow in that same direction. In some cases, there are even the same players are involved because there's a lot of money to be made in the development process. But that's, I believe, more extractive than it is productive, and that can get deep as well. A lot of these can, but um, we did a lot of really good work in Broward County. We restored the ocean dunes because they were completely gone. We replanted all of them, and now there's a well-established dune system that we built, and uh, the details of how we were able to get that done are just phenomenal. There are projects here that really need that kind of attention, that kind of detail, and that kind of experience where we protect our waterways and we plan accordingly, where not only are they protected and but that they have recreational value, that they have supportive value as water supply and water conveyance, and yeah, there's a lot that's there. So when we talk about in comparison, in Broward County was much smaller. There was a lot less attention on the Soil and Water District there. Uh, I did very well. I was elected and then I was reelected. Uh, Definitely enjoyed my time with that district. The numbers here in Wake County have just sort of ballooned into unbelievable numbers. And when I speak with state representatives and state senators and they hear my numbers, they're usually floored because they're winning seats off of 20 and 30,000 votes. And in this last election, I received 98,000 votes. Which most Congress folks would are just envious that anyone could pull such numbers, and those aren't numbers pulled because of anything other than there was an idea that people hear, that there's an understanding that people have, the people who I have met and the people who know me know that this is sincerely who I am and what I do and how I commit myself.
So in 2022, which was the first time you ran in Wake County for this position, you did fairly well as well. I think you did about 50,000 votes. That was an off-year election, so the turnout was lower, as it will be again this year. And that was about 35% of the votes you would have needed to win that election. I think there were two seats available that year. In 2024, there was only one seat available, and you got about that 98,000 you mentioned. That was about 46% of what you would have needed to win. So that's a significant improvement. It's as I mentioned, the we have elected the Wake County Party has elected a person to Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor position going back about 20, 25 years ago. So it is doable. Um, it's too early to say who your opponents are because, of course, the filing for this position is not until next month. But can you tell us a little bit about, do you know how many seats are available this time and who are the incumbents that are likely to run for reelection?
So the incumbent, there'll be one incumbent who politics can be a mess sometimes. I'll start with that. And it was very interesting. The anecdotal story that somebody used as they're running, and then at one point even made a comment that they were the only farmer who was running. doing everything they could to try to diminish that I even existed, which was kind of fun. Um, and so she'll be running again, and and I do believe one other seat because the cycle got interrupted. So I do believe we have one other seat.
Super. So, what plans do you have are you going to be doing anything differently this time in terms of electoral politicking? Is there a way that folks can get involved in your campaign and help out?
You know, the big thing that I really would like from people is that any of your social organizations that you're a part of, whether it's your homeowners association, your community association, whether it be your civic association who you are a part of, it would be my pleasure to come and speak. Uh, I don't live in a partisan space. I don't I don't live a life like that, and therefore, I'm not don't feel that there's a concern if it happens to be your Democrat Party group or your Republican Party group or your Green Party group. Uh, Sharing ideas is how things happen. Hearing what people's concerns are is how good leadership is grown. So my goal is to want to do what it is that the people are looking for. Of course, nestled in the values that I hold. And so my goal when I speak to groups is to share who I am and you know implore that my values are what I live and have lived for a very long time, and that the seat that I'm running for, the position that I'm looking for, not only is something I already have experience in, but already have a good sense as to what good can be done. And so, for anyone who's out there, those groups give me an opportunity to come and speak to you, to answer your questions, to hear what your concerns are for Wake County, especially around the issues of conservation, environment, water resources. I want to hear what people have to say. And doing it one by one has been effective. Just talking to everybody, being able to stand in front of groups, being able to address them and hear those concerns. So that's, I think, the number one thing that people can do. You know, Everybody always has to say that, we need financial resources to put materials out there. Not out there soliciting for the $1,000 checks. If you've got one, we're good. We'll take that, but we're not soliciting for those, right? But what we do need is support to be able to put material out, to have printed material, to maintain our online material, maintain the running of a campaign, because it really is an activity that needs that support. And if you're not in a position to do that, get me in front of your groups. Give me an opportunity to speak. Give me an opportunity not only to hear you, but to answer your questions. That's how I think people could be most effective in helping us move this forward. I would even extend that they should do the same for all of the candidates that we have, and give us an opportunity to talk.
And if you are interested in getting in contact with the Lewis campaign, his website is lewis4nc.org. And there's links there to email, phone. Also, you can check out his Facebook page and his X slash Twitter page. Also, learn more about some of the other issues that Brian is mostly concerned about. He's got a page that talks about his priorities. Once again, that's lewis4nc.org. So, Brian, I want to thank you very much for spending your morning with us, and best of luck in the campaign.
Well, no, Brad, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I hope to have an opportunity to do it again before we get up to election day. These opportunities, you know, I tend to speak from here. I don't tend to produce material to read from. I really don't need a script. because this is who I am and it's what I do. But and I understand, yes, a script would be nice, but nonetheless, um, but having an opportunity, we were able to produce the materials that get the word out so that people can hear what it is that we're concerned about, hear what it is that we're offering to do, and how we would do it.
Super. Well, thanks again. And I will mention that Wake LP, we do meet every Wednesday evening, mostly for social discussions at the um, uh, where do we meet? We meet at
Tobacco Road.
Tobacco Road on West Jones Street. And I believe the 13th, which is not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, we have our third in a series of topical discussions. We are going to be talking about ice and what the proper North Carolina reaction should be with respect to the federal immigration policies as the way they've been implementing them this year. And so that's just it's just a discussion. If you're interested in that topic, come by. You don't necessarily have to participate. You can just listen, but you're certainly welcome to participate as we discuss that. So anyway, thanks again. And next month we'll have another candidate interview. So we'll look forward to that. And thanks for tuning in. Bye now.